Welcome back to the Select Start Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ace. I'm back with my pod fam, Big Baller Ed. Night, that's Ian spelled backwards. Kosher Killers in the house. How are you doing, fellas?
Doing good.
Man, every week keeps getting better and better because you know what? The playoffs are right around the corner.
Right around the corner. I can't even see what I saw today with that game. It was horrible.
That game was awful. Watching that game, oh my goodness.
That game was awful. Oh.
Judging by those reactions, I'm glad I was teaching during the game.
It's like, it was just bad.
Yeah.
It was just bad.
A 19-14 game isn't going to get anyone a ton of fantasy points.
Like a blowout would have been better than this game.
If you were in that game, once you saw Pittsburgh muff a punt inside of their own 10, like you knew it was going to be that kind of game. It was better than me.
Week 12 is in the books, and it was a wild one. We had Baltimore and Pittsburgh closed out the week, and Pittsburgh, I guess they dominated for the most part. The score looked a little closer than what it was. It was kind of a crappy game overall. Pittsburgh dominates a COVID-decimated Ravens team. I guess I'll first gauge with you guys your impressions of the game first, and then we'll talk about fantasy implications later. Why don't you go ahead and lead us off, Nye?
I mean, Pittsburgh, they've kind of just did what they've done all year. I mean, you saw it in that Dallas game. They just played down to their competition. And, there was no reason why Baltimore should have been in that game or should even been as close as it was. And Pittsburgh they just got complacent. They got really, really complacent. And honestly, in a real football sense, like you kind of worry about, are they even really a contender, to win this whole thing? Because, as good as that defense is, and they lost Bud Dupree today, it's just, can that offense be as good as that defense is? They have all the skill players, and they all have all the talent to do so, but they just continue to play down.
So Nye thinks Pittsburgh Steelers playing down to their competition once again. That's facts, though. I can tell you that's facts. I own the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. They definitely play down to their competition. Kosher, you agree with Nye?
Absolutely. As far as fantasy implications, I said that a 19-14 final isn't going to get you a lot of fantasy points one way or the other. The Ravens had Marquise Brown. I had a late touchdown, a nice 70-yarder, but beyond that, he was held very much in check. There was no one that really went off offensively for either team. Gus Edwards, who I thought would have a better showing today, only had 10 yards, 9 carries. He did vulture a score, but Justice Hill looked like a lot smoother at running back. Defensively, the one guy that stood out would be TJ Watt for the Steelers with his 3 sacks today. But a 19-14 game, you're probably not winning many weeks with players that were playing today.
Just to touch on Marquise Brown real quickly, he was on his way to another one of his disappointing weeks until he broke off that long touchdown. So I wouldn't even take too much away from that. But watching this game, I just kept getting the impression like this looks like a Wednesday night football game. Not to say we've ever had a Wednesday night football game before, but it really looked like these teams came out flat. They played flat. They stayed flat. And at the end of the game, they were flatter than the soda that I opened at the beginning, hoping to expect a good game. It really was kind of disappointing, and I can't take too much away from a fantasy perspective, because I do expect the Steelers to be more productive fantasy-wise, at least. From a real NFL sense, I won't really get too much into it, but from a fantasy perspective, you got a lot of disappointments. Juju Smith saved his fantasy week with a touchdown, but he averaged about 5 yards per catch, so that wasn't the most impressive game, even with 7-8 receptions. A disappointing day for fantasy, a disappointing game to watch. Not too much that I want to take away from this one, because we've got a season's worth of production from both of these teams that I believe is going to be a lot more telling moving forward than this week's disappointing game.
Jump back in here, Nye.
No, you just hit it right there. Marquise Brown with the long touchdown. And honestly, if you're out there and you're starting a Marquise Brown, you're really just hoping for something like that. But I'm going to go over to the tight end spot. Eric Ebron had a pretty good day. I think he hauled in 6 of 11 targets for 54 yards. He had a few drops, which probably would have helped his output. But considering what you're getting from the tight end this year, he had a pretty solid day. You mentioned Juju Smith, kind of salvaging his day with that touchdown. Both Claypool and Deontay Johnson kind of struggled with the drops today, which kind of didn't really help out that offense. They had a lot of third down struggles.
Yeah, let me double up on that Hebron take. He's obviously not on anybody's waiver wires, but it bears mentioning. We got a tight end who actually had a productive by tight end standards day with 7 receptions. Even if it was 54 yards, yeah, he could have had a much better day. But hey, we're talking fantasy, and for those of you playing in tight end leagues, Eric Ebron gave you a good week, so it's worth mentioning.
Falls right in at number 10. Fell right in at number 10.
Wednesday afternoon football, we get our first glimpse of it this year. Honestly, I didn't even realize they were playing up until the fourth quarter of that game, where I was like, holy smokes, the game is on.
This game kind of just closed out a weird week for football in general. I mean, we had wide receivers playing quarterback, tight ends playing quarterback, Nick Mullins out dueling Jared Goff, and the Raiders. The Raiders totally crap in the bed.
Yeah.
This week, everyone took crap in the bed. Kyler, for me, took the ultimate crap in the bed. It's just like, I should have known Antonio Gibson's 35-point Turkey Day special was going to be short-lived and for nothing. But, this is fantasy football in 2020. Expect the unexpected.
I know. Who would have known, Thanksgiving would have been the best of the weekend?
Kendall Hinton lived both every fan's dream and just about every fan's reality. Finds out he's starting at quarterback in an NFL game and has more interceptions than completions to his own teammates. Lived the dream, lived pretty much every fan's reality.
I gotta say, the Real Housewives of Tampa Bay is getting more and more exciting every week.
I say condolences to you out there, you owners out there who had to face Tyreek Hill and Derrick Henry.
I mean, those guys were crazy.
Yeah,
they were in vintage form. We're gonna jump right into the pick 2, but instead of being just a solely pick 2 week, we're gonna throw some matchups in there. So one of the biggest or more compelling waiver wire ads is probably Kiki Kuti. He could be an option with Will Fuller getting suspended, which we'll talk about. I guess that's probably the big news. There isn't much huge injury news, but there is the Will Fuller suspension. So yeah, I'll leave this one open today, fellas. Give me your best Week 13 waiver wire ads or matchup plays. I will start with you, Big Baller Ed.
Since you touched on Kiki QT, and I do love my tight ends quite a bit, I'm going to throw out Jordan Akins' name. Not saying he's going to be a top 10 tight end, but I think that when we look at streaming, especially as the fantasy playoffs come up, he's a good option for touchdowns. He almost had one this last weekend. And with the opening up of targets, this is just a little bit of an opportunity now that Jordan Akins can take. I think he is the tight end on this team to take a look at. So a little bit more potential volume that might equate to, 2 weeks ago he had 6 for 5. Maybe he can get another 4 receptions in the coming weeks and complement it with a touchdown. So Jordan Akins is worth a look. Trey Burton as well. Trey Burton still is a guy who keeps getting looks in the end zone. He keeps coming down with them. As long as he's getting those looks in the end zone, a tight end coming down with a touchdown is a valuable tight end. So Trey Burton as well, for those of you who are tight end hungry. I know there's a lot of you guys. It's been desolate at the tight end position. And, I was thinking to myself, who might be this year's Brashard Perriman? Maybe it's Brashard Perriman. But I do think that there's something to be said. I think there's something to be said about taking a look at Brashard Perriman. If you are wide receiver needy, Brashard Perriman is getting the most valuable looks on this Jets offense and is putting up the production. Denzel Mims has been consistent, but Brashard Perriman has still been a little bit more of a viable play on a week-to-week basis. A nice little schedule for the next 2 weeks: Las Vegas and Seattle. We did see Seattle have a pretty decent week, but we also we saw a little bit of potential for that coming into the week with their matchups. So Las Vegas, Seattle, those could be good matchups for Perriman to put up some nice fantasy production as you finish up this fantasy season. So Brashard Perriman, Trey Burton, and Jordan Akins.
Nye, jump in here, bro.
Yeah, I like all those picks. I'm gonna start mine off with Kirk Cousins, playing very, very well as of late. He's been a top 12 quarterback the past 2 weekends. A guy who has next up on the schedule, Jacksonville. It's a good matchup coming up for next week. Jacksonville is they're playing better, but they still struggle to cover the pass. They'll have Adam Thielen back up in the lineup, which should help Kirk Cousins put up more efficient numbers. And then I'm going to move over to another guy, another quarterback, Mike Glennon, who on the other side has the Minnesota Vikings, who also struggle to cover the wide receiver position. Mike Glennon had a fabulous week. He threw for 2 touchdowns, along with 235 yards. And I'm going to add in one of his wide receiver mates, Colin Johnson, a rookie out of the University of Texas, a big body 6'6" wide receiver who runs in the 4.5. He's a guy who, if DJ Chark and Chris Conley continue to sit out, or if they continue to miss time, he's another guy who can show up on the radar.
Mike Glennon, they need to put some respect on his name. How bad would Chicago love to have Mike Glennon back? Like, I'm sure they would love to have Mike Glennon back. Roses for Mike Glennon, man.
Bad
Roses.
Quarterbacking is just a Chicago thing. It's just what Chicago does.
Right? That's real life. It's becoming synonymous with just Chicago. Horrible quarterback play.
Bad quarterbacking.
Kosher, give us your pick 2 or matchup plays.
A guy I'd like to highlight is Latavius Murray on the Saints. Since Taysom Hill's taken over at quarterback, Murray's carried the ball 31 times for 173 yards. It looks like he's becoming a little bit of a bigger threat in the backfield than Kamara, because Kamara's numbers have dipped a little bit as Murray's are picking up. It might just be the game script with Hill in a quarterback instead of Drew Brees. It might be a comfort thing, but right now, Latavius Murray is someone that you might want to keep an eye out on, assuming he's on a waiver wire. A couple other running backs, because apparently we're not only picking 2, we're giving you a third one for free each, but I'm going to keep it with the running backs. I'm going to go to Las Vegas, and I'm going to look in their backfield. With Josh Jacobs being banged up a little bit, I'm looking at Devontae Booker to pick up the slack a little bit. I'm looking for him to fill in a little bit for Jacobs in the next week or 2. And moving to the NFC North, I'm going to say, look at David Montgomery. We just made fun of the Bears quarterback play, but we cannot make fun of David Montgomery. He's got a game coming up against Detroit, who's been mediocre against the run, and I look for him to have a solid week.
He had one of his better fantasy weeks this past week, David Montgomery.
Quite honestly, it might be the best game I've ever seen David Montgomery play.
Mm-hmm.
Like, another game doesn't come to mind for me when you speak of David Montgomery. But he had a really good game.
Admittedly, David Montgomery hasn't looked good against anybody, matchup or not. So
Yeah.
So you got to give him a little bit of credit for at least hitting the matchup and producing.
If you were to make a short list, it's probably on that short list of more most disappointing fantasy players this year. We'll definitely have to compile a list of fantasy disappointments for you guys at the end of the year.
No guarantee that he's on waivers, but he shouldn't be. He's 71% rostered in sleeper leagues. I want to get this up at least into the 80s. Jamal Williams needs to be rostered, guys. Yeah. He's putting up production which is playable, and if Aaron Jones goes down, then he's more than playable. So he's got dual value. We talked about Kareem Hunt's dual value coming into the season. It's what made him worth drafting, and I don't think too many people drafted Jamal Williams. Well, guys, Jamal Williams is putting up the kind of production that we talked about Kareem Hunt putting up, being a viable flex play on a week-to-week basis and being one of the most valuable handcuffs. If you're the Aaron Jones owner, you need him. If you aren't, you might still be able to get a really good production out of a running back who's sitting on way too many waiver wires right now.
Yeah, I feel like you speak to me right now. I do have Jamal Williams right now. And shoot, he probably would have been a better play than.
I feel like he's eating into Aaron Jones's value right now.
Just a little bit, huh? Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Frank Gore?
Funny little stat. This means nothing on a grand scale. But I'm gonna steal this from. I think it was the ESPN show. But Frank Gore is it was the Fantasy Footballers. I want to give credit where credit's due. Frank Gore is the only running back to not finish outside of the top 24 this season in any week. So. You sneak in there. You still sneak in there.
Frank was a legend. He's a legend.
I have an issue with that stat on like 2 different levels. Like,
there's so many low. Like I said, don't take this to mean much more than anything.
Like Frank Gore, basically you could book him as a top 24 back every week. But like Adam Gase, what are you doing, man? Like, You understand you can get more out of a better running back? Like,
His top performers. I'm just going to start off with Aaron Rodgers. He went ballistic on the vaunted Chicago Bears defense, going 21 for 29 with 4 touchdowns. Him and Baby Kittle, Robert Tonyan, now connected 2 weeks in a row on touchdowns and now have 7 total touchdowns together on the season. As easy as it'd be for me to mention Tyreek Hill here, I'm not. I'm going to mention DK Metcalf instead. He toasted a great corner in Darius Slay, going 10 for 13. He did have a touchdown, but he did average 17 yards per reception. DK balled out on Monday, and he did it against one of the best. I'll throw it back to you guys. Top performers, Kosher Killer.
Hey, you're not going to mention Ty Streak Hill, so I feel obligated to. 13 catches, 269 yards, 3 scores. This man won you weeks this week. That was one hell of a performance. Who's his quarterback? Patrick Mahomes. Completes 37 passes, 462 yards. He accounted for almost 500 yards of offense when you add up his running yards and the passing yards. The last player I'll highlight this week, Deshaun Watson, 4 touchdowns, over 300 yards passing, had 8 carries for 24 yards, but very efficient game. Both of those guys balled out, and really Mahomes made Mahomes and Hill. It was a beautiful thing to watch.
I feel sorry for those Will Fuller owners, though. Man, that was too good to be true. It was too good to be true.
I've got reason to make those Will Fuller owners feel even worse, because Will Fuller is actually one of my top performers of the week. Right where he leaves 7 for 6, 171 and 2 touchdowns. Came in with 36 fantasy points. A fantastic way to end the season, if I do say so myself. So shout out to Will Fuller. We'll see you again next year. We'll see where, but hey, you know what? You went out with a bang, and what else can we really ask for? Kosher stole 2 of my top performers, so I was scrambling to pick up on it. Don't worry, though. I did figure it out. I'm going to start off with Jeremy Chin.
oh, you just stole mine. Oh, go ahead. Speak on it.
This guy was on my rookie watch earlier this season, and I picked him up and I dropped him, and I can't say that I'm happy about dropping him anymore because I picked up Kevin King instead. Because Jeremy Chin came through with 13 tackles. He got 1 forced fumble and 2 fumble recoveries. An absolute monster stat line.
Forget the 2 touchdowns.
Oh my goodness, I didn't even see that on the line. Jeremy Chin,
yeah,
because he recovered both and he took them home.
He took them to the house.
This guy. Anyway, look at that. Jeremy Chin, I think we mentioned David Montgomery enough, so I'm just going to read his line real quick. 11 for 103, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 40 yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. And my last guy, because I don't want to go on for too long, but this guy, I love watching him week to week. A.J. Brown, an absolute beast of a man and of a stat line. He only got targeted 6 times, only had 4 receptions, turned that into 68 yards and a touchdown. And then you know what? They threw him out there on the hands team. They kicked up a fly ball, if you want to call it that. And A.J. Brown caught it and literally just sprinted it home. A.J. Brown, man, I'll be honest with you guys. He had a stinker the last time he played in the Indianapolis, just 2 weeks prior, 4 for 1 and only 21 yards. So I was thinking to myself, is A.J. Brown to play this week? I'm glad in my leagues that I had him that I did play him, because A.J. Brown is a play every week. Shout out to these dudes: A.J. Brown, Will Fuller, Jeremy Chin, and David Montgomery.
Nice. Top performers.
All right, I'm gonna give my top performers to 2 guys who recently come back from injury. First guy, Austin Eckler, coming back against the Buffalo Bills, had a pretty efficient day considering Anthony Lynn was talking about he wasn't gonna be the bell cow. He ended up looking like the bell cow. He carried the ball 14 times, I think, for 44 yards, but was able to catch 11 catches on 16 targets for over 80 yards. He didn't get in the end zone this weekend, but it's it's going to happen eventually. This kind of production probably can be replicated, considering Austin Eckler is a versatile running back. Austin Eckler had a really, really good game. And another guy that I am glad to say that I roster, my man Deebo Samuel, who came out and torched the Rams. 15 targets, 11 catches for 130 135 yards, 133 yards.
What I love about Ian's two guys. These two could be fantasy these could be fantasy championship winners. At both of them coming back off of injury. So I think we might have forgotten about them a little bit. Not that we forgot the talent, but their names just haven't been around. They showed out. Austin Eckler didn't look 100%. Another week, and Austin Eckler scares me if I'm facing him in the fantasy playoffs. Debo should scare you if you're facing him in the fantasy playoffs. We can't get out of here without mentioning Derrick Henry. 3 touchdowns, 27 carries, 178 yards. It's Derrick Henry's season. Winter is coming, and he's leading the charge. I gotta say, I was rather unfortunate. I faced Derrick Henry this week. And you know what? This is where my dishonorable mentions are going to come in, because I told everybody to start Derek Carr. I thought the matchup was absolutely lighted up, set it on fire, and then the car came back burning.
And that's on fire.
And he threw an interception, 3 fumbles, man, against Atlanta. I'm doubling down.
Raheem Morris has the Falcons defense playing really well.
Low key, yes, he does. Low key, he does. He does.
But I am going to double down. He's got the Jets this week. I'm not suggesting the next week where he's in Indianapolis, but you know what? I'm going to stick to my guns one more time. I'm going to I'm going to fire up the ignition on the car. And you know what? If it blows up, then it blows up. You never really know. It's one of those older cars, but I'm taking
We're going to find out if it's a 67 Mustang or a 72 Pinto.
Real quick. We throw Kyler Murray into that list. At the top, I didn't mention we were going through top disappointments, but you get a few here. Throw Kyler Murray in the mix. He did not look like himself. A lot of Kenyon Drake touches in the red zone.
It's worth saying with Kyler that he did injure his AC joint last week. It's possible that the bounce back is coming this year. I don't know if it comes this next week. Depends on the health of his shoulder, but he does deserve a small pass for being injured in his throwing arm.
That's going to do it for our show this week. In this Week 12 recap, Week 13 primer. Any final thoughts, fellas, very quickly?
Playoffs are coming up, so it is very important that you really pay attention to the matchups. It's probably more important than actually who you have on your team starting or projection-wise. Pay attention to those matchups, because honestly, those are the things that are going to be able to carry you, and especially in crucial spots in your lineup.
Kosher Killer, final thoughts.
Hey, we all saw this week the problems that the Broncos and the Ravens had because of COVID. Please don't be like those organizations. Be smart, wear a mask, social distance, keep washing your hands, stay safe. You don't want the equivalent of a 1914 football game in your life, or the equivalent of throwing the 4th or 5th string quarterback out to start a game. Be smart, mask up, and just stay, do what you can to stay safe and stay healthy.
Nothing's guaranteed in fantasy football. And so sometimes you really got to go with them gut calls. I know Ace called for gut calls just a week or two ago. So I want to double down on that. And, sometimes you'll go on your gut call and you'll be totally wrong, but you'll look at your bench and you wouldn't have won anyway. So make that gut call. Go for that title. Don't settle for the second best score in a week when you need the first. Go get a championship. And while we're at it, the Steelers are going to lose this week to the Washington football team.
Oh, dropping hot ones on the way out.
You're right.
Shit, I don't know about that.
Alex Smith is coming for that. He knows that it's him and Ben Roethlisberger for comeback player of the year. If he wins it this week, he got a chance.
Alex Smith.
Terry McLaurin's about to ball out like Art Monk, baby.
Alex Smith has that joint sewn up.
That game is going to be closer than advertised. It's going to be closer than advertised. I think so. I don't think Washington's going to win, but it's going to be closer than advertised. I like the pick. We appreciate you guys hanging in there with us. This year has been really, really wonky. All right, that will close out our show this week. Just want to encourage you guys to keep liking and sharing the channel. Help us go live. Every subscription counts. I think we're at 99 now. hoping we get to 100 this week. This is the week we get to 100, guys.
We're crossing our fingers here.
Keep liking, keep commenting, hit that notification bell. For myself, for Big Baller Brand, for Coach Killer, for now that's Ian spelled backwards. We are Select Start Fantasy Football Podcast, and we out.